Okay, I usually don't do current events, but I'm gonna do one for this little local issue. All right, this deals with the Teresa Bowling shooting. Um, while I feel sorry for the family, and you do have my condolences in the loss of your loved one, there's certain issues in this that was brought up in the newspaper that don't make any sense. And while the man who murdered her husband at the time, is in custody and is facing the crime he committed, I'm also concerned about the people who allowed it to go on, specifically the police officers that he refers to so much as his friends. There's five facts that come out of just one article here that needs to be addressed. Fact number one is that a Corporal A.D. Palmetier of the West Virginia State Police had a conversation with Teresa Bowling in 2007 or 2008 at a bar in Cool Ridge. He doesn't remember the exact date of this. However, he remembers that Teresa said she and her husband had been fighting and he had been abusive, even firing his handgun in the house. Now, bear in mind, they have a 2-year-old and an 8-year-old child in that house. So not only is he beating on their mother, he's firing a gun in the house. Uh, Teresa mentioned her husband's friendship with police officers and yet refused to file a complaint because she was too scared to do so. Now, she's telling this to a police officer who happens to be a personal friend of the family. Uh, I have a question if it ever occurred to this man that the reason she didn't want to file a complaint was because she wasn't sure that he would do anything. She was afraid he would be one of the cops who would protect her husband from the law. And so she gave him the information of what was wrong, told him that a crime had been committed, but said she didn't want to file a formal complaint, hoping this officer would say, well, here's the deal. Either you don't file the formal complaint or I get a warrant for child endangerment based on what you told me, and you and your husband both get arrested. And then once we do that, I have the authority to tell the public defender to offer you a plea bargain down to probation or whatever if you testify against him for all this other stuff. They do it with drug dealers all the time. They do it with other people all the time. Why didn't they do it here? Why didn't they protect the lives of these two little kids? Forget about the mother who allowed the abuse to happen, who allowed it to continue to happen because she was afraid of these police officers. For a moment, let's just assume that she was afraid and ignorant and didn't know she had anywhere else to go. What about these children? What about these officers' duty to report a crime, to report any sort of crime, whether it's friend, family, or what? Anyways, after the shooting occurred, Christopher Bowling called 911 and asked specifically for Sergeant Greg Duckworth and Corporal A.D. Palmetier of the West Virginia State Police. When the dispatcher told him she had a deputy on the phone, he refused to talk to the deputy. Now, this is another thing I find interesting. This woman was This poor woman was shot years after this conversation with Palmetier. And through all this time, when this happens, she calls specifically for this man, or he calls specifically for this man to come investigate the accidental discharge or the shooting or whatever. The other fact in this is that Judge Hutchison refused bail due to a cited significant history of violent temper, alcohol abuse, and violence outside the use of alcohol. So this guy has a criminal history of violence and of drunken violence. And still, the police officers did nothing. They felt without her cooperation it wouldn't do anything. Well, gee, I've seen police officers threaten people before. I've seen them say, hey, this is coming back to a crime in this way, and I can charge you with it too unless you testify. Why didn't they do that to her? Oh, right, because her husband was their friend. That's why he requested them specifically. This is the type of thing that needs to be investigated. This is one of the reasons why people do not like cops. This is one of the reasons why a few bad apples does spoil the whole bunch, because you know what? It doesn't matter that they allowed it to happen. It doesn't matter they knew it was happening. It doesn't matter that they didn't try to stop it. All that matters is that they don't get blamed for it because they have a position of authority and they're the sheepdogs. Well, you know what? Here's the thing about it. It's the most disgusting thing I've ever seen in my life. No wonder, you see all these reports about Sergeant Greg Duckworth getting ready to retire, and he's only a sergeant. 20 years in the police force, and he's only a sergeant? Gotta be fucking up somewhere. And the thing about this, I mean, this whole thing disgusts me with these police officers, and it disgusts me because they took the same oath that I took to uphold and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. They took the same oath that I did to do the right thing no matter what, and here they are allowing abuse and child endangerment and everything else to happen for so many years, and they did nothing. They allowed it to happen. They're just as guilty as the man who pulled the trigger because they could have stopped it. And maybe that's a heavy burden to place on their shoulders, but when you're the friend of the family, when you're a friend of the person who's committing the crime, and you allow them to continuously commit the crime, when that person apparently is in such good, standing with you that he requests you to the he requests to have you come to him from the 911 operator, and you have to ask, exactly what the hell have these guys gotten him out of before that he would know that these officers, one of whom who says, I'm no longer friends with them, Palmatier, would actually, what have they helped him get out of before that he would actually request them, especially someone who isn't his friend, someone who claims that he was never friends, that he was no longer friends with the guy because of the abuse and everything else. It's an injustice to the deceased. It's an injustice to her children. It is injustice to our society. For anyone who believes in any sort of functionality of the system, reading stuff like this makes you question whether or not the system was worth believing in at all. And again, to the family of Teresa Bowling, if you see this, you do have my condolences. I feel it is a crime and a tragedy what happened to her, and you may not agree with me, but I feel the officers themselves are responsible for this, not just the man who pulled the trigger. I think there should be at least 3 people on that stand awaiting trial.